They also have a drugstore that's legal, right? So if anybody needs a joint, you can have one. Just to... Okay, let's start. Let's see if this works. And it does. We kind of have this thing with the Pirates of the Caribbean in the Joomla project. So this presentation is called Stick to the Code. Well, if you saw the movie, for people that saw the movie, who saw the movie? Who didn't? Go see the movie. The code, the Pirates code, it's more a set. It's not like rules. It's more a set of guidelines. But this is how we see the Joomla project. It's not like rules. It's more like guidelines. So that's also part of our development philosophy a little bit to make an analogy. Okay, well, my name is Johan Janssens. You can find me on our forums and on our resources under the nickname of James. I'm Joomla project manager and also the lead developer of 1.5 and also of the Joomla framework. Okay, first of all, for those who don't know yet, what is Joomla? Joomla is an open source content management system. For the people that know Joomla 1.0, they will know that it's just that. It's a content management system like there are so many. What I'm going to try to explain in this presentation is how Joomla 1.5, which is the next version, is also a framework. It's a different kind of framework than what Thomas has just explained with Zen, and it's also a different kind of framework than what Symfony is doing, and I will try to situate that so you have an idea of where it belongs. I'm not going to give you a lot of coding examples. That's a completely different presentation, but I'm going to situate who we are, what we're doing, and why we're doing it like we're doing it. First of all, Joomla means altogether. It comes from the Swahili word Joomla with a U. It was founded in September 2005. That's a mistake. It's almost 2 years old, and it was a rebrand from Mambo, or as we like to call it, a spoon. We don't like to call it a fork, because technically it's not a fork. We kind of took the whole project and we put it down somewhere else. Meaning all the contributors, all the coders, everybody except the name. The name was branded and trademarked by someone else, so we couldn't do that. There is a lot of information out there why we did that. I'm not going to go in there. If you have questions about it, you can ask me later. We're going to focus on the framework now. So, what I did was, I had to prepare a presentation, and it was Zen, Joomla, and Symfony. So the first thing I did was I had a look at Zen. Because I need to know what we're dealing with here. This is what I found out when I put Zen on my laptop. It was not much, except a lot of directories with a lot of code in there. That's what it did. What I could do with Symfony was this. It creates something for me. It's more going into something that already does stuff, right? And when I do that with Joomla, I get that. I get a website, right? So, what does that tell me? Well, it tells me a lot. To me, it tells me that there are three differences, that there are a lot of differences here between those three different projects. I tend to call Zen a PHP class library, and Thomas has shown that it is that. It's 150,000 lines of code and it's a lot of classes. As such, it doesn't do anything.
Johan, could you please step back?
I cannot move around here. Okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Sorry. So it's a class library. A lot of classes that do that are going to do a lot of things for you. Symfony is more a web application framework. It helps you to easily build a web application. And that's my view. Joomla, on the other hand, is more going in the direction of a content management framework, a web content management framework, and we're trying to add layers to our framework to make that possible. We're not there yet. We're missing vital features, but that's the goal. So what I see here is that I see three layers. It could be that Symfony is built on part of Zen, and that Joomla is built on part of Symfony, and it's built on part of Zen. It's a layer on top, right? So, Joomla 1.5. What I want to talk about is our goals, our philosophy, our architecture, and then something about our framework. I think if you understand those parts, you have a good idea of, if you're going to look at it, then you have a good idea when to look at it and when not to look at it. There are going to be a lot of reasons when you want to use it, and there are going to be a lot of reasons when you definitely don't want to use it. So first of all, our goals. With Joomla 1.5, what we try to do is we try to internationalize our system. That was a huge problem. We had not had UTF-8 support, and it has shown that UTF-8 is the building stone to make an international application. So that's what we worked on. It's not an easy thing to do because you need to internationalize your whole framework. Every little bit of code needs to be internationalized. And we're still missing features like date handling and also number handling is not completely done yet. But the basic parts are done and the whole framework is also internationalized. In PHP 4, which is what we're working on, we're now on PHP 5 here, it's even more tricky because you're missing vital libraries and you need to implement certain parts in PHP code. We also wanted to create an application framework. Joomla 1.0 is basically one big pile of spaghetti code. It's all thrown together. There's this one gigantic file in 1.0 called Joomla.php. It's enormous. That's where it all happens, and we wanted to like split it up, put it into classes and objects, and make a nice framework out of that. What we wanted to do is we wanted to provide more extendability. Joomla already provides extendability in different ways, and we wanted to improve that even more, to make it even more easier for people to extend the system. We wanted to provide extendability inside the framework, with also more extendability to our components and modules, templates, languages, etc. Accessibility and usability. Like I said, we are not only a framework, we are also a web application. And people that are building websites with that web application need to be able to build accessible and usable websites. So one of the things we needed to take care of was make sure that all our business logic and all our presentation logic was separated to be able to create an application that it can be made accessible. And of course, the most difficult one, backwards compatibility. There are 1,000 extensions available for the system, and you need to create, to some degree, it needs to be backwards compatible. So you need to also deal with that. This is actually the one. This one and this one are the ones that you spent the most time in. This was a complete rewrite from all the code we did, and this is a lot of testing and going back to your extension developers and talking to them and understanding what the problems are with your extensions to make the system as backwards compatible as possible. So, this is actually a picture from Olo.net for the people that don't know Olo. Olo is a website that gathers statistics about open source projects. It's a very interesting website where you can find lots of information about different open source projects. In this case, it's Joomla, and it shows some statistics here about the languages we use, about the licenses that are used, about the code base, and something about the contributors. What I want to point out here is mostly the fact that most of our code base, if not all, is GPL, or the lesser GPL. We have a little bit of the PHP license in there, but that's only 9 files. As you can see, code base is with comments and blanks, it's 240,000 lines of code. Without the comments and the blanks, it's somewhere around 150,000 lines of code, which is in the same range as the Zen framework, be it that this is also a web application. It's actually a complete CMS. What you can see here is that if you count all those together, you easily get like 500,000 lines of code that have been rewritten in a period of a year and a half. With only 150,000 lines of code in there, you see that we rewrote it 3 times to get it to the point where it is now. We didn't really add a lot of code, we just rewrote it and rewrote it and rewrote it again until it was what we wanted it to be. Actually, in the future, we hope to get the amount of lines of code down instead of up. So, philosophy. Concept. Joomla is open source, of course. That's what we do with Joomla means altogether, it is an open source community. We're not funded by a company, like in case of Symfony or in case of Zen. There are a lot of Zen people also behind the Zen framework. All our work is done by volunteers. Open source is very, very important to us, and of course also the GPL license. We are a content management system, and we try to stick to that. We're not a document management system. We're not a shop. We are doing content management. Freedom, choice, control, and fun. These are the values for our community. It needs to be free. Freedom is very important in open source. People need to have a choice. Extendability is very important for the system. People want to have control over the system. And it needs to be a lot of fun to work with it and develop for it, otherwise people will not do it. So, how do we do that on the content management part? Well, these are some mantras we use. First of all, keep it small and simple, or keep it simple, stupid. Don't make it harder than it actually is. Be flexible and agile. The more flexible you are, the more easily you can adapt yourself to the future. Design to be extendable. This is what we try to be very good at. Develop a very decent basic framework and a very decent basic CMS and allow that to be easily extendable by different types of extensions. Reduce choice. This is a usability part. For people that know a little bit about usability theory, the less choice someone has, the better you will feel about it. I will give a good example. If you go to, you already had that you go to a restaurant, right? So you walk in and you sit down at the table and you look at the menu chart. And there are like a gazillion choices on that chart. What am I going to choose? That's a hard choice. I will take the steak. No, maybe I will go for the spaghetti. Shit, no. What will I do? And then the waiter comes along and he goes, "Sir, we also have the special of the day." And then you go, that's maybe a good choice. It's only one choice. It's a special of the day. Can be bad. So you take the special of the day, right? And you go out and you go, "Oh, that was a good meal. It was a special of the day. Well, I had a good meal." Research has shown that the more choices you offer someone, the less happy he will be. Right? What does Mac do? They only have 3 laptop configurations. They had a webcam, but these days these webcams come with the Mac. I don't need the shoes. I get it, right? So that's something that Barry Schwartz is very good at. He's a professor in psychology, and he has done a lot of research to that. The less choice someone has, the better he will feel. Then use the 80-20 principle, which is an economical principle. We use that too, and Thomas has shown that they use it the other way around. They try to implement 80% of use cases and leave the 20% to the rest of the world. We do it the other way around. We implement 20% of use cases and leave the other 80% to the rest of the world. It's those 20% that people are looking for and not the other 80%. If people need the 80%, then they can implement it themselves through the extendability of the system. And it has proven to work because at the moment we have 1,700 extensions available. And the core is seen, there are features that need to go into the core, of course, but the core is seen as a basic core for a content management system. Architecture. So, CMS architectures. What do we believe that needs to be part of a CMS system? That's this. And then I will explain later what is in there and what we need to improve. I'm not sure if it's completely visible, so I will go over it. First of all, you need to have file management, right? You want to upload files, you want to work with files. You need to have user management in a CMS. You need to have groups, roles, permissions. You need to be able to work with your users. You need to have content management. Of course, that's what you do. You do versioning, you do workflows, you do access, you do searching, you maybe do transformations from your content in other formats, PDF, XML. You need to have template management because in the end, you're an end user application, and the end user application is going to have templates, it's going to present the user interface. Those need to be able to be usable and accessible, and you need to have decent XML and CSS support, of course. You need to be secure. If you're not secure, nobody's going to use you. It's that simple. Web feeds. In these days, a web application without feeds isn't a web application at all. So you need to do RSS 2.0, Atom 1.0, and maybe others, but these are the ones you definitely need. Web services. You need to have XML RPC, AJAX, JSON. These are things you also need and want to implement. Internationalization, of course, through UTF-8. Very important for us is RTL, right to left languages. And it's not only the stuff that Thomas has shown, but it's also making it easy for a template developer to implement a template that is both left to right and right to left. The more easy it is for him to develop something like that, the more easy it is to make it available to a community. Make it hard and they won't do it. We use INI files for translations. You have a complete system to support all different kind of formats. Our translators don't understand any of that. If I give them an INI file, they will know what to do with it. Framework. We need a framework as the base layer for that system. What do we want in that framework? We need cross-database support, we need caching, we need an MVC implementation, we want PDF, we want LDAP, and we want a file system layer. That's what we believe we need. And we need extendability, a lot of it. The more extendability, the better. We need an installer to install all those extensions. We need modules and plugins, in a way.
What is the e-file for internationalization?
The ini file?
Yeah,
You don't know what an ini file? An ini file is basically a file with key value pairs. It's a key equals a value, and it's just a large file of key value pairs.
Okay.
And it's a very easy format for translators to work with and to explain to people.
And that's the same as it's been used in the current
No, in the current version we use defines, which is basically PHP language.
Okay.
So we switched that to ini files. Okay, so Joomla, the CMS, one big box. Now, in 1.0, this is it. This is what you get. And there are different parts that are like floating around here. In 1.5, we have tried to layer it, divide it. What we did is, we created what we call the content management framework. This is the framework part. This is basically where Zen would be in. This is also basically where Symfony would be in, but Symfony would be a layer higher. Symfony would probably be the application layer and the framework layer, because Symfony provides a little more. It's also, by default, a web application. What we did is, we have a framework layer, an application layer, and an extension layer. And this layer is not seen in most frameworks or in most solutions. In most CMSs, this is either one big block, or we're talking about a framework. In our case, we added extensions to it. So what does that mean? Well, the framework comes in two parts. You have the libraries. This is what has been shown by Zen, a lot of code here, to make your web application work. And then you have plugins, which is also something that Symfony has. This is simply to extend your framework with functionality. Then the second layer, you have your application. And in Joomla 1.5, you have 4 applications. You have an administrator application, your backend. You have a site application, which is your front end. You have your installation application to install the whole thing, because we want to deliver this to end users on a shared host, and they want to be able to install it through a nice graphical user interface. And we have also an XML RPC application to go into XML RPC and communicate with the framework and with the CMS. By layering it in this way, you could decide to only use this part, which is the content management framework in the libraries, or to start and build your own web application and not use any of the extension functionality. You could do that. There could be reasons you want to do that. For example, I want to develop a very simple in-house management application for whatever, and I don't need all that extension functionality because it's a custom application anyway, and I don't need a lot of fancy stuff, so I can do it here. If you talk about extensions, then we provide 4 ways to extend Joomla, actually 5, because the plugins is also one. The components, the major blocks, which are actually small applications. The modules, these are small presentation blocks you put in your user interface, the menu system, a search bar, a poll at the right. Some systems call them blocks, we call them modules. Templates, of course, and languages. Together, this forms a content management system. And below it is a content management framework, which is especially focused towards providing all these with the necessary juice and fuel to do what they need to do. Anything that these don't need is not going to be in here. That's a difference with Zen. Zen tries to put a lot in there to make sure it's all there. We're doing the other way around. If it's not needed here, we're not going to put it here. Framework. So, why yet another PHP framework? There are so many, right? Some of them are slowly fading away. Some of them are coming up. Symfony is there, Cake, Mojave, Zen. CodeIgniter is something that is coming along now? Well, I will go back here, but it's in my slide. First of all, when we started, and that was, let me think, September 2005, was actually before Zen officially announced that they were going to work on this framework. We were involved in discussions with Zen, and one of our core guys is actually also on the list. We were involved in discussions with Zen about the framework. They were looking for different open source projects to involve in the community process to build the Zen framework. And one of our guys actually worked on one of the modules. I think it was ACL or Session, I'm not sure. But at that point we decided to not go for Zen because we wanted to build this on PHP 4. Joomla 1.0 is built on PHP 4. If we needed to switch this to PHP 5, we would break all backwards compatibility with existing components, and it would be a whole different ballgame. So we chose to go for PHP 5 for backwards compatibility reasons, and also because most of our developers are not even used to developing object-oriented code in PHP 5. If I start pushing these guys towards what Zen is doing, they will spook. It's a different level of programming you have in our community. You need to be aware of that. So PHP 4, we did. What we also did is try to make it as simple as possible. And that's also that the framework is compact. It doesn't have as much line of code as Zen does. Actually, when we started to develop the framework, and we were thinking about how we can do things in cool ways, we always looked at how can this be done simpler and smaller. And a lot of these packages that are in there have actually been refactored twice to make them simpler and smaller, with the idea that if you need extra functionality, you extend it. So framework principles, pragmatic programming concepts, of course. Object-oriented API, of course. How is that possible in PHP 4? Not completely. PHP 4 is not a full object-oriented language, but you can do it. You just need to make very good guidelines for your programmers in the way that, for example, the peer framework does it by putting out programming guidelines and naming conventions. What does that mean? It means that if we decide at a certain point to completely refactor this framework to PHP 5, it's not going to take a lot of time. Because it's using classes, and the classes are correctly documented as being private, protected, the functions are correctly documented. It's using things in the right way. It has a constructor in the classes, which we try to generate. So moving into PHP 5 is not going to be that hard. A modularized design. Yeah, if you do a framework and you put it all together, it's not going to work. You need to modularize and you need to decouple it. It's focused on content management. It's a content management system we're trying to fuel. And it's built for PHP 5 and upwards compatible with PHP 4 and upwards compatible with PHP 5. So, concepts. Different concepts as what Zen is doing. Decouple as much as possible. Symfony does the same thing. If you build something, build it so that it works standalone. If you build an object, if you build a class, decouple it from all the rest. If you start to couple all these things together and chain them together, you create spaghetti. Use design patterns where possible. Everybody know what a design pattern is? Can I see hands? Who doesn't? Or who does? You don't know what design patterns are?
I don't know what you mean.
With design patterns, okay. A design pattern is basically a way for developers to communicate with each other. It's a guideline. If I implement something, I can implement a certain problem in programming in 1,000 ways. But if I implement it with a design pattern and then communicate to the other developer, this is being implemented with this design pattern, he is already going to have a basic idea of what the code is doing and how it's structured. He is also going to have a good idea how we can extend it. Zen does the same thing, Symfony does the same thing. It's all design patterns. You can be the smartest developer if you want to be, and you can think that you own the world and you can reinvent it all, but it's not going to work if you want to create an extendable system. Don't repeat yourself. Be very dry. Write something once and not twice. Remember the big picture. And I'm not sure if Zen is still remembering the big picture, but that's my criticism. Try to think about what you're actually trying to do, what your goal is. For us, it's content management. Create declarative interfaces. What does that mean? Name things as they need to be named. If it's an application, call it application. If it's a database, call it database. There are other people that are going to read your code, if you're not naming it, if you call something spaghetti or cafe, actually that's a good story. Why do we do that? I had a very bad experience with that when I was doing my thesis. I needed to work on a 3D rendering engine, and the guy that came before me in the company had basically built it, and I needed to make changes to it. He was French. So I opened his code. First of all, the code was completely documented in French. Not to mention the fact that he used these very strange naming conventions, like he had objects called mocha, and there were other objects called cafe. So there was like cappuccino, right? Where does this belong? I couldn't make head nor tail from that code, right? So name things as they need to be named. It's going to make it a lot easier for people to read your code. Keep it dry, shy, and tell the older guy. Well, there's a very good article on Pragmatic Programmer, don't come about it. Dry, we know, don't repeat yourself. Shy means don't create code that slaps in your face. Make the code simple and easy to read. The bigger your class and object are going to be, the harder it's going to be for someone to understand how it all works. Tell the other guy basically means create a system that is event-driven, where something is telling something else that something is happening, and try to decouple it. The best is to read the article, because it's a presentation as such to explain what this means. So, framework design patterns. For the developers among you, you should be knowing what this all is. To go over the list, what we use in our framework, we use a factory pattern. We use it a lot. You find, in most of our classes, you find something like get instance to simply create the object. We use the singleton pattern a lot for performance reasons, so that we are sure that you only create one instance of it. For example, our user object is by default a singleton. A template pattern, that's very simple. A template pattern, if I have a certain class and I want to extend it, for example, I have a database class and I want to create a database MySQL class or a database MySQLi class, that's a template pattern. I define the basic functionality and functions in the JDatabase class, and I extend it using a JDatabase MySQL class and implement the functions in that class. Right. Adapter pattern is a little bit more complicated. It's where you have a code that is using certain functions and you want to like implement it in your interfaces. So you adapt it. You basically create a. It's not really a facade, but you create a facade for it so that you can go into your functions. That is then going to call that external library. I think probably the Zen bridge in Symfony works with an adapter pattern. Composition. That's where you put different objects together in one object and make them do certain things. A registry pattern, it's already explained with the Zen registry class. It's the same thing. It's just a registry. It's a data container with namespace support. An observer pattern. This is very much used in Joomla because we also implement an event-driven system for our plugins, and that is using an observer pattern. For people that don't really know what this is, it's basically a way to observe if something is going to happen, and then when it happens you get notified about it, and then you can action on that notification. Very simple example in 1.5 is user authentication. When a user tries to authenticate, he fills in his username and he fills in his password and he clicks login, the first thing that happens is he needs to be authenticated. Do I know this user? Well then at that moment there is an event fired on authenticate. And then there are different observers who can observe that event and can decide if that user is authenticated, yes or no. Which allows us to authenticate against any resource we want. We can authenticate against LDAP, Gmail, any plugin you want to build, we can authenticate against. And the first one that has a positive authentication is going to say, okay, he is authenticated, he can log in. MVC pattern, probably, are you going to talk about that?
A little.
A little, then I will not do that. MVC is very important. Model view controller, separation of business logic and presentation logic, and I will do the rest to you. Okay, so framework packages, 16 of them. What do we have? Application, which is basically the application layer, allows you to build an application with one line of code. Base package, there are a few base functions in there. Caching, client, FTP client, LDAP client. For us, an FTP client is very important because, again, we work mostly on shared hosts. We have end users that download Joomla, install it on their shared hosting environment. It needs to work there. A lot of cPanel installations have problems with PHP writing files, and then they cannot delete the files through FTP. So we have built an FTP client which works on 99% of FTP service so that we can write files through FTP in PHP, which is a lot easier because then the user can remove them again when he goes into an FTP desktop application. Database, document, basically rendering of the output, the template, rendering of the modules, HTML, PDF, feed, and XML and a raw format are supported. Environment, this is something like JURI, URI handling, that's also in there. Request handling, JRequest, response handling, JResponse. You have something the same, I think, in Symfony.
Yeah, but it's not related to environment.
Well, we call it the environment package, so but the classes are in there. Our event package, this is the whole plugin event system with the observer pattern. File system handling, filtering, input and output filtering. A lot of HTML handling, which also takes care of certain parts of our user interface who are standardized or can be standardized in the backend for all our extensions. Internationalization, an installer, which is something that most frameworks don't have, because we want to be able to install stuff from in the user interface and not through a command line, so we need an installer. A registry, same thing as what Thomas already explained. Session, every web application needs one. Templates, this is to implement different templating engines in 1.5. User package and a lot of utilities to do array handling. There is stuff in there to work with. Logging is also in there. A simple XML implementation for PHP 4 is in there, things like that. So that together forms the framework layer for 1.5. And it kind of resembles a lot of the packages that are in Zen. It's only a lot smaller and there's a lot less functionality in here. The functionality that is in here is the one that Joomla 1.5 needs. Okay, so where are we now? I just showed you the overview of where we think we want to go with this CMS and this framework. This is where we are. What we have is, to start at the top, we have a component framework. Our components are basically our applications, and they're run inside this bigger CMS. So each time you can basically install different components, and they're like mini applications. The components use an MVC pattern. They produce humanly readable URLs, which is a routing implementation. And they have pathway support, so that they can also communicate with the pathway for the website. We have an application framework, FTP file system layer, like I explained. LDAP support for communicating with an LDAP directory, PDF library for rendering PDFs. We have caching, we have cross-database support, and we have session handling. We have our event framework. So we use different kind of framework technologies. Event framework is used for user authentication and user synchronization. It's also completely extendable. It's basically plugin driven. So you can write your own event plugin and then let that event plugin handle different events, which can be a lot of things. Search is also completely extended by plugins, for example. Services, XML RPC integration and JSON integration. Templates, of course. Internationalization, like I said, UTF-8, RTL is what we support, and INI files. Simplicity, what does that mean? Well, Joomla is an end user system. So it's also important for people that create extensions for it that it's also one consistent interface. If developer A is going to do something his way and developer B is going to do it another way, and you're going to put that all in one user interface, it's not going to work. The user is going to not understand it because it's always completely different. So that's where the simplicity and the look and feel comes in. We want to try to create the same look and feel, especially in our backend for each extension. This is actually something where most frameworks don't deal with, and we need to deal with because we have that extra layer. Feeds, RSS 2.0 and 1.0, reading and writing, and our installer, which is a unified installer. In 1.0 it was not a unified installer. What does that mean? If I create an extension, being it a template and a language, a plugin, or whatever, I put it in the installer and he will install it and we will know what to do with it. Okay. What about the future? Like I said, we're not completely there yet. We're not yet a full content management system or a content management framework. What do we need? We need to improve our user management a lot. That is coming in 1.6. 1.6 is not going out without user management. What we also are working on is installer. What we want to add is update support and improve package support so that we can package extensions together. We can, for example, have a module and a plugin and a component packaged in one package, install it. We will also allow to install extensions on the fly so that you can install them from the extension website. So you basically browse the extension website, click, and then say, okay, install this component for me in this local installation here. This is a difficult one because it involves dependencies and security, of course. So we're still working on that. And then content management, we need to improve our versioning. We might want to add some workflow. Export-import is something we need to work on. And our linking between the different parts in the system. I have added an article, I have added a banner, I have added a web link, and I want to link to them in. I want to add a link to another article in my article. So the system needs to know about all that. So it would be good that this is also something that happens on a framework level so that every extension developer can make use of it. Okay, so that's basically it. Backwards compatibility, of course. We want to be almost 100% backwards compatible with 1.5. Especially on a framework level. What do I have? Nope, that's it. I'm done. Did you all see me there? Hi. I tend to keep my presentations not that long so that I have 10 minutes for questions. Yes. Otherwise we can go out for coffee, but
I've got a question. Can you give me some clues, because this is a framework, and that, for me, that means that you can extend it to a certain amount of, to make it to do something that doesn't do standardly. But can you give some examples of what you would think is a good example to use Joomla 1.5 for, when you say, well, then you're stretching it too far, so you should go a level lower, for instance, and stick to Symfony or something else?
Well, shall we do that in the panel discussion? Because that's probably the most important question that's going to come up then. So if you have very specific questions about this presentation, and otherwise, like when to use something and when not to use something, we could do the panel discussion. I think it's better fit there. Actually, I still have like 5 minutes, right? I can show something, right?
Show.
Something. Let's show something. Of course. Actually, I will cheat a little. Okay, so this is internationalization from a user perspective, and this is very important for us because it needs to work in a user interface. There's a difference between making it work in the code and making it work for a template developer. So, for example, what 1.5 can do is, let's find one. So this is UTF-8. This is internationalization. What you see here is that there are strings which have been translated yet, so you use the English one. We don't have all the fancy goodies that you have in your framework. So with us, it's simple. It's not translated. It's just in English. Other things that we, for example, also don't have, oops, yeah, it's the other way around. Yeah, he cannot present this list in different languages. He will always present it in English for the moment. That's also something we're missing. But the internationalization is there. It's completely UTF-8, which means that you can do that. And the most important part is that it also switches the interface. And it needs to be very simple for a template developer to do that. And it's very simple. He just needs to override his CSS file and make a few modifications to it, and we have this result. So it's a different way of thinking about a framework, and it's more thinking about how are the extension people, the extension developers, the template developers going to work with this code, and what are their skills. For a template developer, he doesn't want to know about PHP at all. The less PHP we try to learn him, the better. Okay. Showing something else. Actually, I will quickly show you the framework as such in a directory structure. This is all the libraries we use. We use a combination of our own framework, which is the Joomla framework, and still a lot of some third-party extensions. One of them is the PHP XML RPC library, and we also use the PHP UTF-8 library from Harry Fuchs to do all our UTF-8 stuff, because in PHP 4 it doesn't come out of the box. And then you have the Joomla framework. This is the actual Joomla framework with the 16 packages. A factory file to create these instances of most of these classes, and that's it. So we try to keep it very simple, so that people can work with it. It kind of uses the same naming conventions as what Zen also does. So you have the name of the package, but in this case the file is in there instead of out there. It's not in the main directory; it's in the directory itself. So this is document.php. We have a renderer, and these are then template. It's a template pattern, and it's different renderers. We have an arrow renderer, feed renderer, HTML, PDF, for example. So this is again internationalization. When you install the system by default, it comes with English, except the installation application comes with all languages that we have available. And we're working at the moment at more than 30 languages that our translation teams are working on. But you can install, this is one of the extensions, you can install other languages and then they become available here, and then your user interface is translated, not your content, well, your user interface. So, to show you where the extendability is, you have components and you can install multiple of these. And then you have your extension types, you have your modules, your plugins, your templates, and your languages. And these plugins are all framework extension level things. So we divide them into, it's probably not readable. Is that readable? No. Well, our plugins are divided, this is all framework level stuff. So are divided into groups. We have an authentication group, a content group, an editors group, a search group, a system group, a user group, and an XML-RPC group. So in all these groups you can create your own plugins. You can also create your own groups. And the system has a list of probably around 30 events that the core by default uses, and these events you can tap into and extend. Well, I will show you something fun to show you the power of what we can do. Let's see if this one is going to work. So, this is something we're playing with. What we're trying to do is a lot of people that work with CMS that need to go into the backend have problems with the fact that working in a web browser can be slow, especially if the connection is not very good. You don't have all the user interface elements available that you want to have. You only have forms, which is limited. You can do Ajax, but that has limitations, and there's problems with usability, accessibility. So one of the things we started working on is this thing. It's called sitemap. It's written in Java, and it's an XML RPC client for Joomla 1.5. So what we're doing here is this, and I will take a license. This loads the data from our Joomla and presents it to the user in a desktop application. So you don't need to go to your website. You don't need to go to the actual backend to manage your site or to manage your content. So I can easily make a change here. I will actually try and see if it works. I'm not sure. So this says test, right? Let's remove that. This is stuff you never should do, but I'll do it anyway. There we go. You see? So I didn't go into the backend to manage this website. I just used my Java application. This Java application is built. It's also a plugin system, so for the moment it has support for content and web links, so you can also manage your Joomla web links with it. The idea is to also implement other components so that you can almost fully manage your content of your website from your desktop. The cool part is that this also works offline. If you create a text in here and you're offline, the moment you connect, you will sync. So you can make changes to your website locally, offline, and then sync when you go online. The other nice part is...
And how is that handled with when you have several content managers?
Well, first of all, Joomla locks content if you check it out. So that's one thing he deals with. After a certain period, the content is unlocked. And the last thing we need to implement here, which we haven't done yet, is diffing. So that if there is a problem, if there is a conflict, that you actually can see the conflict and you can edit it. We're also going to do that here. But we're still playing with the offline and synchronization because there's also a second problem with huge databases, so we still need to find out how we're going to do that performance-wise. But this is the concept. Another thing this does, and well, where are we? This one, right? Well, it's not 100%. We still have errors, but yeah, he's not rendering the image because he cannot find the image. He's not downloading all these images locally. He's taking them from the internet and not connected. But this is a YCWiki editor. It's a Java. It's actually not a Java YCWiki editor because these things are not available in open source. They cost a lot of money. This is actually the YCWiki editor that will be available in Firefox 3.0. This thing comes directly from the Firefox trunk. And it's using Xolrunner for people that know that. Xolrunner makes it possible to run Mozilla and the Mozilla application suite locally. And what we then do is we use the XPCOM Java bridge. So we bridge Java to Xol. And then we use a DOM bridge to bridge this editor to DOM. So we have a completely standardized DOM interface we can manipulate. Still following? Right? And that's this one. Now, like I show you, it's still buggy because it's not 100% optimized. We're actually using code from their trunk, and we asked them to build it for us. But it can do stuff like this. It can if this was an image, it would extend the image on the fly. We can easily play with it in this way. Do stuff with it. So it's a completely YCWiki editor they're implementing in Firefox 3.0, and we're trying to implement it here. It's a proof of concept. So, and then you can explain MVC. What we wanted to do with this in the future is We want to make it possible for this kind of application to communicate with the system on the fly without the need to develop special plugins for it. But that's stuff for Joomla 2.0, that's future stuff we're doing research for. What we want to do is we want to develop a database scheme and a data API, which is standardized. If we can do that, then anybody could connect to that data API and get the data out of it, being that a web application or desktop application or XML RPC. But that's far into the future. But one of our open source projects this year is working on data API. And it's the goal to actually finish that by the end of the summer, by the end of August. The student that is doing that, he took a semester out of university especially to do that. And we have 2 mentors on it, so we really hope to make a lot of progress on that. And that's and then I'm going to shut up. And that's a completely different level of working with a framework, because what we're going to do is, you don't worry about the data API or the data scheme of your applications. Symfony only provides the means to access the data. What we're going to do is, because we're a CMS, we're going to create a structured or a defined data and a data API, a data scheme and a data API. If we do that, we can allow external applications to work with that API and work with that data scheme. That means a node-based scheme allowing to put content in there, content types, content items, stuff like that. It's, again, an extra level we add because we're more than a framework, we're a complete package. Right? Still questions? Or
The other way around, that the data is coming from different sources, like is there also
well, what you then probably would do is, but this is just brainstorming here, it's me thinking out loud. What you then probably would do is you will build an API where you can have filtering, and filtering you can extend so that if you have a certain data source, you can build a filter for it, and that filter is going to deliver the content in a defined format that can be put into the system. And that it works in both ways. It's filtering out and filtering in, so you can filter in and you can filter out to a certain format. That's possible. That's what content repositories do, big content repositories do. What we want to do is, we want to do the small version, not the big one. Are we still awake? Yeah?
Firefox 3.0, when is that coming out?
Don't ask me!
Somewhere next year or something?
Yeah, no, they already asked me about Firefox. I don't know. I really don't know. I have no idea. The only thing we do is we email Philippe, who is in charge of the Java bridge and is also in charge of IAS communication with the Firefox project, and we basically ask him to do a build. And then we download the build, we integrate it, and that's it. I have no idea when it's coming out.
And for local content, have you looked at the XML? They say like user data that IDE is using. Firefox is also using XML local data. And that means go up to, well, they can limit it to 5 MB. Is that an option for local storing of data which can later synchronize?
Yeah, that's what the system already does.
Okay.
So what it does is the data is transformed in XML. Actually, in a later phase, we're going to go to RDF, but we're not there yet. For the people that don't know what RDF is, I will talk about it outside. We want to have it in RDF. For the moment, it's XML, and it's stored locally. The only problem we have is how much do we want to store locally. We need to implement some intelligent system that is going to decide when the data can be removed from the local cache and stuff, things like that. But it's indeed already stored locally. We probably will set like a limit of 5 megabytes on it.
Yeah, I have a question, because you were saying that it's Joomla 1.5 which relies on the framework. Is it ready yet? Is it stable yet?
It's beta 2, which means that that it's frozen. The APIs are frozen. The only problem we're having now is it's backwards compatibility. If this was we implementing something completely new, like what Zend is doing, it will be ready next month. But a lot of testing needs to go on with all these third-party developers to make their extensions as backwards compatible as possible. And that means making changes to some of our APIs, adding some APIs back to our legacy layer so that extensions are as backwards compatible as possible. And that takes a lot of time and effort. Because a lot of these people have the tendency to wait until that beta 2 is there and then start testing. Where we actually had hoped that they had done the testing earlier. So we see a lot of feedback coming in at the moment. But if you want to use the framework, you basically can.
It's considered stable.
The framework is considered stable. It's undergoing security testing and performance testing, but if you just use the framework, you don't have that performance problem because you just tap into the framework. Not the performance problem that the CMS has.
Okay.
It's a completely different way of testing it. But in your case, you already have Symfony, so.
I'm just asking.
Okay, thank you.
Zie je het trouwens, jongens? Ja.